I'm Bambi Francisco with this segment of Lessons for Entrepreneurs, and I'm very excited to have Scott Banister here as my guest. Scott has had a storied background as an entrepreneur. From about 10 years ago, you created the bid for placement business that GoTo built upon, that eventually became sort of Google AdWords. They built upon that. Then we met many years ago when you started Ironport Systems. Oh, let me backtrack. You were also one of the early investors and on the board of directors at PayPal, and which was a success, sold to eBay for $1.5 billion, I believe, in 2001. And then you came to the studios where I interviewed you when you started Ironport Systems, and then you sold that for $830 million. Last year. So you've been really busy and very successful. So I think that for the entrepreneurs, the many entrepreneurs that watch Vator TV, I'm sure that they will be able to get a lot of insight from your experience. So can you offer up 3 pieces of advice for the viewers?
Sure. So I think the first thing we did right at Ironport was we put in place really strong leadership. I was lucky enough to have a co-founder that was a great CEO. He was a first-time CEO, but he turned out to be a really, really great CEO. And I think companies are sort of built out of great leadership at the top of the company that's able to recruit even more great leaders. Empower the executives in each function to really run their departments, make them accountable, deliver great results. If you go into a company and you see, employees in each department that are very loyal to their leaders, that's really irreplaceable and priceless.
It makes everything function smoothly.
Yeah, and without that, I think things are very difficult.
What made that person a great CEO?
It's Scott Weiss. I think you've met him. He was actually just on the cover of the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
But I think actually what makes Scott great is actually the second piece of advice that I was going to talk about, which is an extreme focus on customers. So I think a lot of companies in Silicon Valley, it's easy to become focused on your technology or on some other aspect of your product that sort of is more about a reflection of you internally and what you want or what you think people might want. And you always have to be focused on what do the customers actually want, what are we actually hearing from them that they want. Actually go out and talk to them and find out, do they really want the thing that you're building, because you may have to change what you're building. Do you have any
examples of building something that you thought the customer wanted?
Yeah, I mean, at Ironport, our original business plan was to go to enterprises, and sort of the business plan I had come up with for the company was to eradicate SendMail from the face of the earth. SendMail being this piece of email infrastructure that enterprises use to exchange email with the internet. So we went out and did interviews with various enterprises about what would they like to see in a product. We told them about some of the technology that we had to bring to bear on that, and they basically said, well, we'd like to see this and we'd like to see that, but this is a very mission critical piece of infrastructure, and there's actually no way we will ever purchase this product from a 20-person company.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen. So we basically had to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, well, how do we get there? And so we actually sort of refactored our product to target the marketing department. And so then we started going into the marketing department of enterprises and saying, hey, you have issues with email delivery, and your email is a little less mission critical than emails from the CEO, right? And they said, oh yeah, our problems are immense, and they're so immense that we're willing to take a risk on a startup.
Right.
And so we sold into the marketing departments. Once we sold into enough marketing departments, then we started to get cross references back into the enterprise IT guys. And by then also we're a bigger company. We have a proven technology.
You were already a 20-person company when you kind of change gears.
Oh yeah.
So it's okay to do that. I mean, I hear that a lot from entrepreneurs. You have to switch gears.
Absolutely. PayPal did the same thing. I mean, PayPal I think was up to probably 40 people before
they figured out how they're
the
gonna
full
make
transition happened from Palm Pilot payments onto eBay payments. So that was actually my third point I had in my mind.
What's your third point?
The third point is just that you have to be willing to change. I mean that is a big thing that will determine whether you live or die as a startup. Is you can't really think about yourself as a particular product or a particular idea. What you have to think about yourself as is a team of people that have all come together to try to solve customer needs in the world, and sort of no matter what those might end up being. Right. And you're trying one path, but if that path is not working, then you'll just switch and try a different path.
So in our discussions earlier, it sounds like you've been very good selling companies or selling products. You sold Ironport to Cisco Systems for over $800 million. Any piece of advice for companies out there who are thinking about, I want to sell myself, how do I do this? Did you approach them? Do you approach people? Do you make that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to kind of make that decision early on, I think, as to whether you're building a company to take to the public markets or you're building a company to sell. And if you're building something to sell, kind of at what level are you thinking about trying to sell it? Because it's going to affect how you finance the company. So actually, Ironport was always built to take to the public markets. Okay. So we went out, very aggressively in multiple rounds of financing.
How much did you raise
We
altogether?
took on large amounts of money, about $90 million.
Okay.
That company was built for, a very large exit to, to the public markets, and really not even an exit. I mean, we always thought about it as a company that we were building for, to be a decades-long, sustainable business. And I actually think, to some extent, by focusing on that, you end up building something that is actually interesting to acquirers, because you actually build a great business and you actually put things in place that are sustainable over a long period of time, because you can't control the interests of other parties.
Sure.
Right. The economy may go up and down. The M&A may sort of increase and decrease. But one thing is that there's always customers out there, and they're always willing to pay for superior products and superior service. Personally, I always like sort of controlling my own destiny and just focusing on building a business. There are certainly entrepreneurs that have, I think, very successfully focused on building companies.
To be acquired.
Sure. They focus on selling very little equity. Maybe not even doing venture rounds, or doing a very small venture round, and then sort of selling the company in the $50 million type of range, and those can be really successful outcomes.
Right. It's just it's funny because different. I talk to companies where, and I know where they will be, they'll be very aggressive. They'll approach someone and say, "Well, buy me now," or "Buy the company, or I'm leaving," or maybe you should be. I don't know. It's almost like a dating game in some ways. You don't really know how you should, but how would you, as somebody watching right now, probably thinking about how do I navigate these M&A waters?
Yeah. I mean, again, if you're not building the company for sale, then basically I would encourage you not to approach third parties. I think once a third party has approached you, then you are essentially forever dating them in some way. I mean, that certainly happened with Cisco. Is they approached us probably almost 2 years before we ended up doing a deal with them. And they just wanted to stay close to you. And so then at that point they're kind of you're always dating them. They're talking to you, you're talking to them. Just kind of keeping them apprised of the situation.
Was there anyone else besides Cisco?
Not at their same level of interest.
Okay.
They, I think, are sort of a perfect fit for our company, and that certainly has turned out to be true. If you look at the success of the business after they've acquired it, it's been a very successful acquisition for them.
What you're on the board of Facebook and Slide? Oh no, you've invested in, but you're Slide board. So what's some of the advice you're giving to Max right now?
Well, I think Max is very much aligned with me on the willingness to change piece of things. I think that's one of the things that Max has continually done well in his career at PayPal and at Slide. I mean, the Slide started out as this desktop, downloadable slideshow thing, and got refactored into slideshows you could embed on on your
Social
social
networks.
networking profile. So pretty big change, almost as big as the Palm Pilot to eBay change. I think right now Slide has the sort of the challenge of riches, in the sense that it has so many opportunities in the marketplace. Social networking is exploding as a market, and there's all these different platforms that are rolling out. MySpace now has a platform, High Five. There's kind of the open social now, in addition to the Facebook platform.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of areas to try to prosecute at once. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the big challenge for Slide right now, is how do you deal with that much opportunity all at one time in a market where it's kind of hard to hire people right now, right?
Yeah. So
I think they would love to hire 10 more really awesome engineers
Sure.
tomorrow, but it's hard to find those 10 awesome engineers, right?
So you just got to take it slower. You can't.
Yeah, so you
attack
end up
everything.
taking it slower just out of necessity.
And then one last thing, because you're an investor and you're also working at Zivity, and you're also a co-founder with your
Yep.
wife, Cyan Banister,
Yep.
in Zivity. So do you have any advice to her?
Well,
Advice to manage a
yeah,
company
sort of
with
on the
your
executive
husband
team
and
there,
wife
in a
team?
sense.
Or
So, I think we're very focused on kind of zigging where everyone else is zagging. We're building a subscription-based business model there, and that's essentially the advice we've given ourselves. Is hey,
You try to do it differently.
Let's try to take a different route to getting value from consumers, because the advertising route is it's very indirect, right? Instead of being able to go directly to your consumer and say, hey, am I delivering you value? Please give me money. You say, well, give me your attention, and then I'll go talk to these advertisers and see if they want to pay. And that's also a lot more variable when the economy is kind of going up and down.
Sure.
Whereas if you have a direct relationship with your consumer, that's much more reliable.
Yeah.
And so, I think.
Well, that's a big bet. But you also
It's
made a
big
bet
bet,
with
but
your
yeah.
bid for placement business model back then, and now it's the way to do business for
Yeah.
search engines. So
Yeah.
you're the idea guy, right? Or you were at one point.
I have actually carried the title of Vice President of Ideas at one point
For
in my
Idea
career.
Lab.
Yes.
So that's
yes.
a big deal, even at Idea Lab. So follow through with some ideas. That's one of your pieces of advice.
Yeah, if you don't
hopefully.
follow through, if there's no execution, then they're pretty much
Yeah.
useless, and I've discovered that.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Thank you for sharing your wealth of experience as an entrepreneur and an investor.
Sure,
I've been
thanks.
speaking with Scott Banister. He is the co-founder of Zivity, and you're also one of the co-founders of Ironport Systems, which was sold to Cisco Systems for $830 million back in 2007. I'm Bambi Francisco.